It wasn't a bullet that sealed his fate, nor the glint of gold in a dusty creek. For the man they called the virgin Apache destiny arrived on the edge of a frozen wind, wrapped in a simple act of kindness. He was a man who had sworn off the warrior's path, a man who lived by the quiet whisper of the land. But when he gave his father's sacred jacket to a shivering stranger, he didn't just save a life, he unknowingly invoked an ancient law, a blood promise he never knew existed. The next dawn he awoke, not to the song of the meadowlark, but to the chilling silence of 200 Comanche warriors lining his fence, their lances like a forest of death waiting. The wind that swept down from the Dragoon Mountains had teeth. It was a late autumn cold snap, unusual for the Arizona territory, and it bit with the spite of a cornered rattlesnake. It tore at the canvas flap of Taza's modest wickiup, a hybrid structure of Apache tradition and settler practicality he'd built at the edge of his small plot of land. His cabin, a more solid affair of hand-hewn pine, stood nearby its chimney, breathing a lazy curl of smoke into the slate-grey sky. Taza was a man caught between worlds. Born of the Chiricahua Apache, he had seen the bloody futility of the wars in his youth. He had seen friends die for a patch of land that would be taken anyway, had seen the fire of his people dimmed by broken treaties and the relentless march of the bluecoats. So he had chosen a different path. He'd traded the lance for the plough, the war cry, for the soft nicker of his 2 horses. He wasn't a warrior. He had never taken a life, never painted his face for battle. The local settlers in the nearby dusty town of Harmony Creek, men like the crusty prospector Jedediah Smith, called him the Virgin Apache for it. It was meant as a slighter jab at a man who wouldn't fight, but Taza wore the name as he wore his peace quietly, and with a strength they couldn't comprehend. His small ranch was his sanctuary, a testament to his belief that a man could live with the earth, not just on it. He worked a small claim, traded furs, and kept to himself. Sheriff Clayton Brody, a fair-minded man who valued peace above all else, considered Taza a greater asset to the county than a dozen trigger-happy deputies. That evening, as the temperature plummeted, Taza was checking his fence line. The cold was a physical thing, a presence that seeped through his thick wool shirt and into his bones. He was about to turn back when he saw it, a small, huddled shape against the growing dark, half hidden in a thicket of mesquite near the dry creek bed. His first thought was a wounded coyote, but the shape was too still. Caution was a second language to anyone who lived in these lands. He moved with a silence born of instinct, his moccasins making no sound on the hard, cold earth. As he drew closer, the shape resolved into a person, a young woman slumped against the trunk of a skeletal tree. She was native, that much was clear from her buckskin dress and the intricate beadwork on her moccasins, though the patterns were not of his people. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue, and her black hair was matted with frost. She was shivering violently, her breaths coming in shallow, ragged puffs. She was dying. The cold was claiming her. Taza knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and wide, with a fear that was quickly being consumed by a lethal lethargy. He saw the faint tattoo on her wrist, the mark of a Comanche. An enemy. His people and hers had been spilling each other's blood across these plains for generations. Every instinct screamed at him to leave her, that to help her was to invite trouble of the worst kind. But the man who had turned his back on war could not turn his back on a soul in need. He saw not a Comanche, but a human being, a daughter, a sister losing her battle with the cruel indifference of nature. He tried to speak to her in his own tongue, then in the broken Spanish they used for trade. She only stared, too weak to respond. He knew he had to get her warm and fast. His cabin was too far to carry her in this state. He built a small fire with the practiced ease of a lifetime, spent outdoors, shielding the nascent flames from the wind with his own body. The fire caught, and a small pool of warmth began to push back the encroaching cold. It wasn't enough. He looked at the jacket he wore. It was old, the deerskin, worn as soft as a whisper, the seams stitched by his mother's hand. Fringed and beaded in the old way, it was more than a garment. It had belonged to his father Mangus, a war leader of renown, who had died fighting the Mexicans long ago. It was the only thing Taza had of him, a tangible link to a heritage he had both honored and rejected. The jacket carried the scent of pine smoke horse sweat and a faint, lingering trace of his father's spirit. It was his most sacred possession. Without a second thought, he shrugged it off. The frigid air hit him like a physical blow, but he ignored it. He gently lifted the young woman and wrapped his father's jacket around her trembling shoulders. The deerskin was thick, lined with rabbit fur, and immediately it began to trap the precious heat from the fire. He gave her a sip of water from his canteen. Her eyes met his, and in their depths he saw a flicker of disbelief, of confusion, and then a profound, silent gratitude. He sat with her for an hour, feeding the fire, until her shivering subsided into a steady sleeping breath. He knew she would live. The wind howled around them, but in their small circle of firelight, a fragile peace held. When he was certain she was out of danger, he rose. He looked down at the jacket, now warming another, and felt a strange sense of loss, but no regret. He turned and walked back toward his cabin, the wind cutting through his thin shirt, feeling colder and more alone than he had in years. He didn't know her name, nor why she was alone in Apache territory. He only knew he had done what was right. He had chosen life over old hatreds. It was the creed he lived by. He slept fitfully the cold, a constant companion in his small bunk. He dreamt of his father not as a warrior, but as a young man smiling as he placed the jacket on Taza's own small shoulders. He had no idea that this single act of compassion had just signed a warrant he could never have imagined, a warrant written in the ink of ancient tradition and sealed by the honor of his own father's name. The dawn broke, brittle and clear. A crystalline layer of frost coated every surface, glittering like a field of diamonds under the pale morning sun. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Taza pulled on another shirt, his teeth chattering as he stoked the embers in his cabin stove. As the warmth began to spread, he glanced out the window, his mind on the Comanche woman. He hoped she had the sense to follow the creek bed, south back toward her own lands. What he saw stopped the breath in his lungs. His fence, the simple 3-rail pine fence that marked the edge of his property, was gone. In its place stood a wall, a silent, living wall of men and horses. They were spaced with military precision, stretching from the creek to the edge of the low mesas in the east. He couldn't count them all, but his gut told him it was at least 200. They were Comanche, warriors. Painted for battle, their faces stark masks of red ochre and black charcoal. They sat astride their powerful war ponies, holding feathered lances that pointed toward the cold, uncaring sky. The sheer number of them, the unnerving stillness, was a display of power meant to terrify. A declaration. It was an army, and it was parked on his doorstep. Taza's blood ran cold, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning frost. This had to be about the woman. They must have tracked her, found her wearing his father's jacket, and assumed the worst. That he had harmed her, taken her stolen from her. In the brutal calculus of the plains, such an act, real or perceived, could only be answered with blood. his blood, and the blood of anyone who stood with him. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was one man, a man of peace with a hunting rifle and a single-shot pistol. He was facing a war party that could wipe Harmony Creek off the map before breakfast was over. His first instinct was to run to saddle his horse and flee into the mountains he knew so well. But where would he go? This was his home, and the sight of that silent army held him rooted to the spot. There was something more than just menace in their stillness. It was a question, a summons. The news traveled fast. Jedediah Smith, checking his traps along the creek, saw the warriors and rode his mule into Harmony Creek like a man possessed. Within the hour, the town was in a panic. Men grabbed their rifles. Women and children were hurried into the stone-built church. They were terrified, certain that the Comanche were there to raid and burn. Sheriff Clayton Brody was a man defined by a weary pragmatism. He was a veteran of the Civil War, with a face like a weathered map and eyes that had seen too much. He knew a direct confrontation with 200 Comanche was not a fight. It was a massacre. He also knew Taza. He knew the man's character. Something wasn't right. "Hold your fire," Brody commanded, his hastily assembled posse of frightened townsmen. "Nobody fires a shot unless I give the word." "Jed, you said they're at Taza's place, lined up tight as ticks on a hound." Sheriff, the old prospector, rasped his eyes wide. "Just sitting there, staring. It's the spookiest thing I ever did see." Brody made a decision. He slung his rifle over his shoulder in a gesture of non-aggression and rode out alone toward Taza's ranch. He saw Taza standing on his porch, not hiding but waiting. The man wasn't armed. Brody felt a flicker of respect. Foolish, maybe, but brave. As Brody rode up, Taza gave a grim, slight nod. "Sheriff," Taza Brody said, his eyes fixed on the terrifying tableau at the fence. "Care to tell me why it looks like the apocalypse decided to start on your front lawn? I think I helped the wrong person." Taza said, his voice low and steady. He quickly explained what had happened the night before, the shivering woman, the act of kindness, the jacket. Brody chewed on his lip, his gaze sweeping over the warriors. They hadn't moved a muscle. They were watching, waiting for the next move in a game whose rules he didn't understand. "The jacket," Brody mused. "There's more to this than a simple good turn. They're not here for a raid. This is formal." As if on cue, one of the warriors dismounted and began to walk toward them. He was a powerfully built man with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He carried no weapon in his hands, but his presence was more intimidating than any drawn bow. He stopped a respectful distance from the porch. "I am Stone Hoof," the warrior said, in perfect, if heavily accented Spanish. His eyes were not on the sheriff, but locked on Taza. "I am second to War Chief Iron Hand. We have come for the man who wears the spirit of Mangus." Taza's breath caught. They knew his father's name. "I am the son of Mangus," Taza replied, stepping forward. "My name is Taza. The daughter of our chief returned to us this morning." Stone Hoof continued, his voice a low rumble. "She was cold, but she was alive. She wore a jacket that has not been seen by our people in a generation. The jacket of the Covenant." "Covenant?" Brody asked, his hand hovering near his pistol. What Covenant? Stone Hoof ignored him. His focus was entirely on Taza. "You gave the jacket of Mangas to Naya, the daughter of Iron Hand. Our law is clear. Our tradition is absolute. A sacred gift given to the daughter of the chief is a binding offer, an unbreakable vow. You have renewed the peace between the blood of Mangas and the blood of Iron Hand." Taza felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. "I only meant to keep her from freezing." A flicker of something, was it amusement or pity, crossed the warrior's stern face. "Your intention does not matter. The spirits do not care for intention. They care for the act. The jacket was given. The jacket was received. The vow is made. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the frigid air. You will come with us. War Chief Iron Hand wishes to see the Apache who has asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Taza stared at Stone Hoof, the words echoing in the silent space between them. Marriage, covenant, vow. He had performed a simple act of human decency, and in doing so had apparently proposed marriage to the daughter of a powerful Comanche war chief. It was a twist so absurd, so utterly insane, that he might have laughed if not for the 200 spears pointed at the sky behind the warrior. Sheriff Brody was the first to find his voice. Now hold on just a damn minute, he said, stepping between Taza and Stone Hoof. This is a misunderstanding. He didn't know your laws. He was just being a good Samaritan. Stone Hoof's gaze shifted to Brody, and it was like being sized up by a hungry wolf. This is not a matter for a white lawman. This is a matter of honor between two nations. The jacket you see as a piece of clothing is a living treaty to us. A generation ago, your friend's father, Mangas, met our chief, a young Iron Hand, on this very land. They were at war, their people starving the bluecoats, killing them both. They made a secret peace, a covenant. Mangas gave his own jacket to Iron Hand as a symbol of his word. He promised that his bloodline would forever be friends to the bloodline of Iron Hand. It was a promise to end a century of bloodshed. Taza's mind reeled. His father, a fierce warrior, had made a secret peace with his most hated enemy. He had never spoken of it. No one had. It was a piece of history hidden from the world. Iron Hand honored that peace. Stone Hoof continued his voice, resonating with pride. He never raided Apache lands again. But the peace was forgotten by all others. Mangas was killed. Iron Hand grew old. The jacket was lost when Iron Hand was wounded in a battle with the Texans. We thought the covenant was broken forever. Until last night. He turned back to Taza. You, the son of Mangas, found the daughter of Iron Hand dying, and you covered her in your father's own jacket. You returned the symbol of the covenant. To us, there is only one meaning for such an act. You have declared your father's promise is still alive. You have bound yourself to us. You have bound yourself to Naya. Taza felt trapped. It was a cage made not of bars, but of honor history and his own father's legacy. To refuse would be to spit on his father's memory. It would be seen as the ultimate insult, a declaration that the peace was a lie. These warriors were not here to kill him for a crime he'd committed, but to hold him to a promise he never knew he'd made. The outcome, if he refused, would likely be the same violence. What if I say no? Taza asked, his voice barely a whisper. To refuse is to call your father a liar. Stone Hoof said, his tone turning to ice. It is to call our chief a fool for believing him. The peace will die, and the war that follows will start with your blood. Brody placed a hand on Taza's shoulder. Son, don't you do anything foolish. But Taza knew he had no choice. He had lived his life trying to escape his father's shadow as a warrior, only to be snared by his father's secret legacy as a peacemaker. He looked past Stone Hoof at the silent army. They were not an invading force. They were an honor guard, an escort. I will go, Taza said, his decision solidifying in his chest. I will speak to this Iron Hand. Brody looked aghast. Taza, you go into that camp, you may never come out. If I stay, the killing will come here. Taza replied, his gaze meeting the sheriff's. This is my burden to carry. Stone Hoof nodded once. a gesture of grim approval. "Get your horse." As Taza went to saddle his mare, Brody walked with him. "I can't let you do this, son. I can't just let them take you. You can't stop them, Clayton, and we both know it," Taza said quietly, cinching the saddle. "Listen to me. Keep the townsfolk calm. Tell them I've gone to parley. Whatever you do, don't let anyone follow. One stray bullet, and this whole valley will be an open grave." With a final look at his small, peaceful cabin, Taza mounted his horse. He rode with stone hoof toward the waiting warriors. As he passed, the sea of men parted for him, their dark, painted faces unreadable. He was swallowed into their ranks, a lone man of peace, surrounded by the living embodiment of war. They turned as one and began the long ride south, their horses' hooves a muffled thunder on the frosted ground. Sheriff Brody watched them go until they were just a dark ribbon on the horizon. He felt a profound sense of dread. The virgin Apache, the quietest man in the territory, was riding into the heart of the Comanche nation to answer for a promise he didn't know he'd made, all because of a simple act of kindness on a cold winter's night. The ride was long and silent. The Comanche warriors did not speak to him, but Taza didn't feel like a prisoner. He was treated as an honored, if mysterious, guest. They shared their jerky and water with him, and when they made camp that night, he was given a place near the central fire. Still, the weight of their scrutiny was immense. Every warrior who looked at him seemed to be measuring him, judging him against the legendary father he barely remembered. They arrived at the Comanche winter camp the following afternoon. It was a massive village, nestled in a hidden high-walled canyon protected from the wind. Hundreds of tipis dotted the canyon floor, and the air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. Children stopped their playing to stare as the huge war party rode in with Taza at its center. He was led to the largest tipi before which sat an old man. His face was a web of deep lines, his long white hair braided with eagle feathers. His eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and intelligent. He sat wrapped in thick buffalo robes, but there was an undeniable aura of power about him. This was War Chief Iron Hand. Beside him stood the young woman, Naya. She was dressed in a clean, beautifully beaded dress, her health restored. She clutched his father's jacket tightly around her shoulders, and when her eyes met Taza's, she looked away, her face a mixture of guilt and apprehension. Taza dismounted and stood before the chief. So Iron Hand's voice was a gravelly whisper, yet it carried the authority of a rock slide. "You are the son of Mangus. You have his eyes." "I am Taza," he said simply. "You have returned the covenant?" Iron Hand stated his gaze intense. "My daughter told me of your kindness. You saved her life before you could have known who she was. This speaks well of your spirit. But kindness is not enough to join my family. The jacket is a promise of peace, but peace is paid for with strength. My people follow a strong leader. My daughter will marry a strong man." Suddenly, a new voice, sharp and laced with contempt, cut through the air. "He is not strong. He is a farmer who smells of turned earth, not the blood of his enemies." A young warrior stepped forward from the crowd. He was tall and powerfully built, his face a mask of arrogant fury. His chest was adorned with the claws of a great bear. This was Black Moccasin, the most feared and respected warrior of his generation, and he was staring at Taza with pure, unadulterated hatred. Naya was promised to me. Black Moccasin snarled, pointing a finger at Taza. "I will not let her be given to this Apache dirt scratcher, this virgin who has never seen battle. He is not worthy to carry the jacket of his father, let alone marry the daughter of our chief." The challenge hung in the air, thick and deadly. The entire camp had gone silent. Taza now understood the true nature of his predicament. He had not just walked into a political marriage, he had walked into a bitter rivalry. He had saved a life, only to find he would now have to fight for his own. The challenge from Black Moccasin was more than just the roar of a spurned suitor. It was a schism cracking through the heart of the Comanche camp. The younger warriors' men who had grown up on tales of battle and glory murmured their assent. They saw Taza as Black Moccasin did an outsider, a man of a rival tribe, and worse, a man whose hands were clean of blood. To them his pacifism was not a philosophy, but a weakness, a stain on the honor of the warrior he was supposed to be. Chief Iron Hand raised a hand, and the murmurs died instantly. His ancient eyes shifted from the furious Black Moccasin to the stoic Taza. He was a leader caught between the promise of a peaceful past and the demands of a violent present. Black Moccasin speaks with the fire of youth, Iron Hand said, his voice carefully neutral. His heart is strong for our people. His honor has been offended. He then turned his gaze fully onto Taza. Our ways demand that such a challenge be met. He says you are not worthy. What say you, son of Mangas? Taza felt the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes. He could feel the animosity rolling off Black Moccasin in waves. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. If he fought and won, he would be a killer, betraying the very principles that defined him. He would earn their respect through the very act he despised. If he fought and lost, he would be dead, and if he refused to fight, he would be branded a coward, shaming his father's name and invalidating the covenant which would almost certainly mean his death and the end of the fragile peace. It was a perfect deadly box. My path is my own, Taza, said his voice, calm and clear, carrying across the silent plaza. It is not the path of the warrior, but do not mistake a peaceful hand for a weak one. Strength is not measured only in the taking of lives. Black Moccasin laughed a harsh, grating sound. Words the talk of a woman. I measure strength by the fear in my enemy's eyes and the weight of his scalp in my hand. I challenge you, a trial by combat, to the death. The winner takes the woman and the honor. The loser feeds the crows. A roar of approval went up from the younger warriors. Naya, standing beside her father, flinched her hand, tightening on the deerskin jacket. Her eyes pleaded with her father to intervene. She had brought this upon Taza. His death would be her fault. Iron Hand's face was like stone. He knew that to deny the challenge would be to show weakness, to undermine his own authority and alienate his strongest warrior. Yet he also saw something in Taza's quiet defiance that resonated with the memory of his father Mangas. Mangas had been a great warrior, but it was his wisdom, his vision for peace that had led to their secret covenant. A fight to the death proves only who is the better killer. Iron Hand declared, his voice cutting through the noise. It does not prove who is the better man. It does not prove who is worthy of this covenant. He looked from Taza to Black Moccasin. There will be no combat to the death. Black Moccasin bristled, taking a step forward in protest. Chief, our traditions also speak of tests of the spirit of endurance and of the hunt. Iron Hand thundered, his old voice booming with surprising force. You wish to prove your worth, then you will both prove it. The white horns of the Sierra Diablo have not been seen in a generation. They are mountain goats, clever as spirits, swift as the wind. Legend says their horns hold the wisdom of the earth. A warrior who could hunt one would be a legend himself. He pointed a gnarled finger toward the jagged, snow-dusted peaks that loomed on the distant horizon. You will both go into the mountains. You will take with you only a knife, a bow, and 3 arrows. The first man to return with the horns of a white horn will be deemed worthy. He will have the hand of my daughter. The other will leave this camp and never return." It was a brilliant, if brutal, compromise, a test of skill tracking and fortitude, not just brute strength. Black Moccasin's face split into a cruel, confident grin. He was the greatest hunter in the tribe. Stalking prey in treacherous mountains was his art. This quiet Apache farmer stood no chance. "I accept this test, my chief, Black Moccasin," said, bowing his head in a gesture of respect that barely concealed his arrogance. Iron Hand turned to Taza. "And you, son of Mangus?" Taza looked toward the forbidding mountains. It was a deadly trial, and he knew Black Moccasin would not hesitate to arrange an accident for him on those lonely slopes. But it was a chance. It was a test he could face on his own terms. He was not a warrior, but he was a child of the wilderness. He knew the mountains as well as he knew his own heart. "I accept," Taza said. Later that evening, as Taza prepared his meager supplies, Naya approached him, her steps hesitant. The jacket, his father's jacket, was draped over her arm. She held it out to him. "You should take this," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "It is yours. It will keep you warm in the mountains." Taza looked at the jacket, then at her face, etched with guilt. "The jacket is no longer mine," he said gently. "I gave it to you. A gift is a gift." "This is my fault," she said, her voice trembling. "I was running away. My father arranged my marriage to Black Moccasin. I do not love him. He is cruel and arrogant. I was trying to reach my cousins in the Mescalero lands when the storm hit. You saved me, and in return I have brought you a death sentence." Taza finally understood the full picture. Her desperation, her flight. He had stumbled into the middle of a family drama that now threatened to erupt into a tribal war. "Your father has given me a chance to earn my life, not just my death," he replied. "That is more than most men get. Black Moccasin may be a great hunter, but he hunts with his rage. It makes him loud. The mountains favor silence." Naya looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. She saw no fear in them, only a calm resolve. She saw the same quiet strength that had made him wrap his own coat around a dying enemy. "Be careful, Taza, son of Mangus," she said, pulling the jacket back around her own shoulders as if for protection. "His pride is as dangerous as any cliff edge. He will not be hunting only goats in those mountains." Taza simply nodded. He knew. The test was not just about finding the mythical white horns. It was about surviving Black Moccasin. He had walked away from the warrior's path, but it seemed the path had finally hunted him down. The Sierra Diablo were aptly named. They were a jagged, brutal spine of rock and ice that clawed at the sky, a place where the wind never ceased its mournful song, and the shadows hid secrets older than man. For 2 days, Taza and Black Moccasin journeyed into this vertical wilderness, their rivalry a silent, simmering thing that filled the vast emptiness between them. Black Moccasin moved with an aggressive confidence, pushing forward relentlessly, his powerful legs eating up the steep terrain. He treated the mountain as an adversary to be conquered, crashing through underbrush and making no secret of his trail. He was a hunter of the plains, used to chasing down his prey with speed and overwhelming force. Taza, in contrast, became part of the mountain. He moved with a patient, deliberate grace, his moccasins finding silent purchase on stone and pine needles. He conserved his energy, his eyes constantly scanning, reading the subtle language of the wilderness, a bent twig, a disturbed pebble, the far-off cry of a hawk. He was not fighting the mountain. He was listening to it. He knew Black Moccasin was watching him, waiting for a moment of weakness. On the second night, as Taza made a small, smokeless fire in the shelter of a rock, overhang a large boulder, suddenly dislodged from the cliff above, crashing down just feet from where he sat. It was too precise to be an accident. Taza simply extinguished his fire and melted into the deeper shadows, spending the rest of the night in a different location, his senses on high alert. Black Moccasin was not just his competitor, he was his predator. By the fourth day, high up near the snow line, Taza found the first sign tracks. They were cloven like a deer's, but sharper, and dug into the rocky soil with a confidence that spoke of a creature born to the cliffs. He followed them his pace, slowing his focus, narrowing to a razor's edge. The trail led him to a place the Comanche rarely ventured, a series of treacherous ledges and wind-hollowed caves. He knew Black Moccasin was not far behind. He could feel the warrior's impatient energy, a discordant note in the mountain's harmony. Taza found a high perch, concealing himself among the ancient gnarled junipers, and waited. An hour later, Black Moccasin appeared, moving recklessly along the ledge below. His arrogance made him careless. He was looking for horns, not for the delicate signs of passage. He passed Taza's hiding spot without a glance. Taza let him go. This was not a race of speed. It was a test of spirit, as Iron Hand had said. He continued his own ascent, following a different, more difficult path that the tracks seemed to favor. The air grew thin and bitingly cold. He spent hours navigating a sheer rock face, his fingers and toes finding purchase in tiny cracks, the world a dizzying drop below him. It was a climb that tested every fiber of his being, a meditation of muscle and will. Near sunset, he found them. In a high, secluded bowl of alpine meadow, grazing peacefully, was a small herd of the legendary white horns. They were magnificent, their coats a dazzling white against the grey rock, their horns long, elegant, and spiraling. They were not goats, but a rare breed of mountain antelope, believed to possess a powerful spiritual medicine. Taza watched them, his heart filled, not with a hunter's lust, but with a profound sense of awe. They were the spirit of the mountain made flesh. To take one would be a violation, but his life and the fate of a fragile piece depended on it. He chose his target, a lone male-old, with a magnificent set of horns standing apart from the herd. He began his stalk, a slow, painstaking crawl, using the terrain to mask his approach. He moved like a shadow. His breathing controlled his mind clear. He was 50 yards away, then 40. He drew his bow, the familiar creak of the sinew, a soft prayer in the vast silence. He had one shot, one of 3 precious arrows. Suddenly, a cry of rage echoed through the high bowl. Black Moccasin burst from the rocks on the far side of the meadow, having circled around to a higher vantage point. He had seen Taza's patient stalk, and his pride could not bear it. He let out a war whoop and fired an arrow wildly into the herd. Panic erupted. The white horns scattered their hooves, striking sparks on the stones as they bounded with impossible agility towards the higher cliffs. Taza's target vanished in the confusion. The opportunity was lost, shattered by Black Moccasin's jealous fury. They were mine, Apache. Black Moccasin roared, his face contorted with rage as he scrambled down the rocks toward Taza. "You followed me. You stole my hunt." "You were loud," Taza said, simply his own disappointment, a cold stone in his gut. "Your anger warned them I was here." The accusation struck a nerve. Black Moccasin's eyes blazed. "I am the greatest hunter of my people. I will not be shamed by a woman-man who talks to dirt." He lunged, not with a weapon, but with his bare hands. He was bigger and stronger than Taza, and his rage gave him the force of a grizzly. The 2 men crashed to the ground, rolling on the rocky soil. It wasn't a duel. It was a desperate, ugly brawl. Black Moccasin's fists were like hammers. But Taza was wiry and quick. He twisted, using his opponent's momentum against him, trying to subdue rather than injure. Their struggle took them to the edge of the meadow, near a steep, scree-covered slope that fell away into a deep, shadowy gorge. Black Moccasin, blinded by fury, threw a powerful punch. Taza ducked, and the warrior's momentum carried him forward. His feet hit the loose scree. For a moment, he balanced on the precipice, his arms windmilling wildly. His eyes widened, his anger replaced by a sudden, stark terror. Then he was gone. Taza scrambled to the edge. He saw Black Moccasin, 10 feet below his fall, broken by a narrow, jutting ledge, but his leg was trapped at an unnatural angle between 2 sharp rocks, and the ledge itself was crumbling, showering stones into the abyss. He was alive, but pinned and helpless. Any movement could send him plunging to his death. Black Moccasin looked up at Taza. His face pale, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by the primal fear of death. He was at Taza's mercy. This was Taza's chance. He could simply walk away. He could leave his rival to his fate, return to the camp and claim victory. No one would ever know. It would be a mountain accident. He would have Naya, he would have honor, he would have his life. All he had to do was nothing. The mountain wind whispered around him, cold and tempting. He looked at the terrified man on the ledge, the man who had tried to kill him, who had insulted him, who stood for everything he had rejected. Taza had made his choice long ago. He had chosen peace. He had chosen life. He began to search for a way down. The descent was more dangerous than the climb. Taza had no rope, only his knife and his knowledge of the rock. He backtracked, finding a narrow fissure that snaked its way down the cliff face. He wedged his body into the crack, inching his way downward, the coarse granite tearing at his clothes and skin. Below, Black Moccasin watched his every move, his initial shock giving way to a stunned disbelief. When Taza finally reached the crumbling ledge, he saw the extent of the injury. Black Moccasin's leg was badly broken, the bone jutting against the skin. The warrior was grimacing in agony, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cold. "Why?" Black Moccasin grunted the word, a mix of pain and confusion. "Leave me. Claim your prize. A victory born from another's death is no victory," Taza said, his voice calm as he assessed the situation. He began carefully working to free the trapped leg, testing the stability of the rocks. "Your weight is shifting the ledge. We must move quickly." The process was agonizing. Every slight movement sent a shower of pebbles into the chasm, and a jolt of searing pain through Black Moccasin. The Comanche warrior, a man who prided himself on his stoicism, bit back cries of pain, his body trembling with the effort. In that moment of shared peril, they were no longer rivals. They were 2 men against the mountain, and the mountain was winning. With a final wrenching effort, Taza freed the leg. Black Moccasin let out a strangled gasp, nearly fainting from the pain. The ledge groaned ominously beneath them. "We have to climb," Taza stated now. "I cannot." Black Moccasin gritted out, gesturing to his mangled leg. "My leg is dust. Save yourself." Taza looked up the sheer cliff face they had to ascend. He looked at the larger, heavier man beside him. There was only one way. "Put your arm around my neck," he commanded. Black Moccasin stared at him. "What, you cannot be serious. You will kill us both." "We will die if we stay here," Taza said with unshakable certainty. "Trust me." Hesitantly, Black Moccasin did as he was told. Taza took the warrior's weight, a staggering burden that threatened to send them both toppling into the abyss. And then he began to climb. What followed was a feat of almost superhuman endurance. It was a slow, torturous ascent, a battle for every inch. Taza, smaller and lighter, used every ounce of his strength, his muscles screaming in protest. His knowledge of the rock was the only thing that kept them alive. He found handholds no one else would see, used his feet as braces, his body as a lever. Black Moccasin, for his part, did what he could, trying to find purchase with his good leg, his hands gripping Taza's shoulder with a desperate strength. They were not climbing as two men, but as one. Taza was the mind and muscle. Black Moccasin was the dead weight, the burden that had to be carried. Hours passed. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the peaks in hues of orange and blood. They were exhausted, battered, and bleeding, but they were alive. Finally, Taza hauled them both over the lip of the gorge and back onto the solid ground of the high meadow. They collapsed, gasping for air, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the eternal wind. Black Moccasin looked at Taza, who was tending to his own cuts. The Apache's face was scraped and bruised, his body gaunt from the effort, but his eyes were clear. In them, Black Moccasin saw no triumph, no pity, only a profound and weary strength he had never encountered before. It was not the strength of a killer, but the strength of a survivor, a protector, a strength that could carry the weight of another man up a cliff face. "You saved my life," Black Moccasin said, his voice raspy with awe and shame. "I tried to shame you, I tried to kill you, and you saved me. On the mountain, we were not Apache and Comanche," Taza replied, looking out at the vast wilderness. "We were just men, and a man does not leave another man to die." He fashioned a crude splint for Black Moccasin's leg, using their bows and strips of leather from their clothing. He helped the warrior to his feet, or rather to his one good foot. The journey back was going to be even harder than the journey out. They had no prize, no horns of the mythical white horn. They had failed the test. Their return to the Comanche camp 2 days later was a shocking sight. They stumbled out of the wilderness, not as victor and vanquished, but as a cripple and his crutch. Taza himself, weary to the bone, supported the hulking Black Moccasin, helping him hop the last few yards into the center of the village. A crowd gathered, their faces a mixture of confusion and astonishment. Iron Hand emerged from his tipi naya close behind him. His old eyes took in the scene, the two empty-handed warriors, the shattered leg the way Taza supported his bitter rival. "The test is over," Iron Hand announced, his voice carrying a note of finality. "Neither of you brings the horns. You have both failed." Black Moccasin painfully lowered himself to the ground before his chief. "No, my chief," he said, his voice strained but clear for all to hear. "We didn't fail." He looked up, not at Iron Hand, but at the assembled people, his people. "I found the white horns, but my pride and my anger blinded me. I ruined the hunt. My foolishness nearly cost me my life." He looked toward the cliff where he had fallen. "I fell. I should have died. This man," he said, pointing a trembling finger at Taza. "This man I called a coward, this man whose life I made forfeit. He climbed down into the jaws of death and carried me back." He took a deep breath, the confession costing him everything his pride had once held dear. "I measured strength by the ability to take a life. Taza, son of Mangas, has shown me a greater strength, the strength to save one. The test was to find the spirit of the mountain. I sought it on the hunt. He showed it in his heart. He is the one who is worthy." A stunned silence fell over the camp. Naya stared at Taza, her eyes shining with tears. Chief Iron Hand looked at the two young men, then at the deerskin jacket that Naya still wore. He saw the truth. The covenant was not about a marriage, not about a hunt. It was about forging a bond between two peoples through an act of selfless honor. His old friend Mangas would have been proud. Taza had not only honored the covenant, he had embodied it. The chief stepped forward and placed a hand on Taza's shoulder. Black Moccasin speaks the truth. The jacket of the covenant has found the right man. You have proven your worth, not with a prize, but with your spirit. You have the heart of a chief. Taza had gone into the mountains a stranger and a target. He had returned a legend. He had not taken a life, but he had won the respect of an entire nation. He had not bent his principles, but he had bent the will of his staunchest enemy into that of a loyal friend. The 200 warriors who had lined his fence as a threat now looked upon him as a brother. The days that followed were transformative. Taza was no longer the outsider. He was the man who carries a name spoken with reverence. The story of his selfless rescue of Black Moccasin had remade him in their eyes. The warriors who had once seen a weak farmer now saw a leader with a strength they had never known. Chief Iron Hand summoned him to his tipi. With Naya present, the old chief spoke with profound wisdom. The covenant was a promise of kinship, not a cage, he said, his ancient eyes clear. He released Taza from any obligation. Naya, in turn, offered him his freedom. You saved me, and you saved the man I was meant to marry, she said, her voice steady. You are not bound by our traditions. You may return to your home. It was the escape he once would have craved. But looking at Naya and thinking of the community that had finally accepted him, Taza saw that his solitary cabin was no longer peace, but loneliness. A bridge needs to be anchored on both sides, he declared, his voice firm. My father started this bridge. My place is here to finish it. If Naya will have me, I would join my life with hers, not by tradition, but by choice. A brilliant, genuine smile lit up Naya's face. Their wedding was a simple ceremony that sealed a true alliance. Taza did not become a Comanche warrior. He became a different kind of leader. He taught them how to negotiate and build his wisdom, protected by the fierce, now unshakable loyalty of Black Moccasin. Months later, Taza rode into Harmony Creek Naya by his side, and Black Moccasin leading their honor guard. Sheriff Brody watched them approach, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. Well, I'll be, he drawled. Looks like you went to a wedding and accidentally became a chief. Taza smiled back. Something like that. We've come to trade. The sight of former enemies bartering goods in the dusty street was the beginning of a new era. His father's jacket, which he now wore proudly, was no longer a relic of a past. He fled, but the symbol of a future he was building, one courageous, compassionate act at a time. And so the legend of the Virgin Apache was born, not as a tale of bloodshed and battle, but as a testament to a different kind of courage. It's a story that reminds us that true strength isn't found in the ability to destroy, but in the will to protect and unite. Taza's journey shows that a single compassionate choice can echo through generations, turning a simple jacket into a sacred treaty and a cold, dying enemy into the love of a lifetime. His story proves that even in the harshest landscapes of the Old West, the most powerful force was never a gun or a lance, but the unshakable spirit of a good man. If this story of honor, sacrifice, and the untold tales of the West moved you, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up. These legends deserve to be told, and every like helps them ride a little further. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into the heart of the past. And please share this story with someone who appreciates that heroes come in all forms. Thank you for listening.